Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending the Optimity Advisors webinar on the E3 method for getting things done. Hope you're having a great afternoon. I'm Chad Beer, a manager at Optimity Advisors, and I will be your moderator today. I think we've all been in situations where we have an idea that needs support, but we don't know where to begin to drum up that support. The E3 method will give you a roadmap for turning your ideas into initiatives. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, and there will be time for questions afterwards. A quick word about Optimity Advisors, and then I will introduce our speakers. Founded in 2009, Optimity Advisors is a strategy, operations, and information technology advisory firm that helps clients in complex industries navigate rapid market and technological changes. Our information management practice helps clients maximize their data technologies through innovative design and proactive management to exceed their business goals. Our speakers today are Gretchen Nadasky and Matt McClelland. Gretchen is a manager at Optimity Advisors. She runs records and information management projects at large corporations and helps initiate enterprise projects from conception to gaining executive sponsorship through to execution. Matt McClelland is the manager of the Information Governance Office at Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. He oversees multiple information governance programs, including records and lifecycle management, enterprise content management, e-discovery, and enterprise search. Gretchen and Matt have presented the E3 method at conferences around the country. Before we get started, I want to mention that we welcome questions throughout the webinar. All you need to do is type your question into the question window on the GoToWebinar control panel and hit submit. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can during the Q&A session after the main presentation. Also, we're recording today's webinar, and we'll post it on the Optimity Advisors website. We'll send an email once it's up in case you want to watch it again or forward it to colleagues. So, without further ado, I will turn this over to Gretchen and Matt.
Hi, everyone. This is Gretchen. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We're very honored to have you on the call. Matt and I have been developing this method over the course of the last year based on our individual experiences of moving ideas into initiatives and then getting them executed. And we know that you all have very good ideas, and so we hope that this seminar will help you to turn those into reality. For an idea to become an initiative, it needs sponsorship. And what do we mean by sponsorship? Sponsorship can be executives or a group that can help you get things done with their power, resources, or influence. And the E3 method will help you to build a strategy to gain support from stakeholders that leads directly to execution or might just lead to executive sponsorship. In my experience of using E3 has been with getting an enterprise records management program off the ground. It was based on one person's idea of the fact that the company really needed a records management program, but there wasn't one. And so we came in and initiated that and started rolling out the program using the E3 framework, which ultimately got C-suite support sponsorship and is now it has now been rolled out. So we do believe that it works very well for projects large and small. And Matt McClelland is going to talk about his experiences towards the end of the presentation. The E3 method to getting things done has 3 steps. The first step is very important, and that's the orientation stage. The second step is to make a plan using the E3 steps of engagement, expectations, and enthusiasm. And the third step is deploying idea tactics to achieve the goals. Idea being identify, develop, elicit, and align. We'll walk you through each one today. So step 1 is orientation, with the belief that if you don't know where you are, you can't get to where you're going. The first thing to really understand is that a lot of projects, and I think we've all experienced this, a lot of projects stop when people realize there's challenges around those ideas, whether it's office politics or money involved or the complexity of the project. A lot of people get stuck in this phase. We think it's important to acknowledge challenges, but then move forward and not let them stop you. So the next phase, once you've acknowledged the challenge, is to say, okay, here's what the challenge is. It's also very important to note the scenario that you're in, because the scenario is going to inform the strategy that you deploy. The first, Matt and I have observed that there's many different scenarios, but they can basically come into three buckets. The pain principle scenario, which is a problem that is recognized, but people don't really want to solve it. The barn door scenario, where the problem has already occurred and there's a lot of fear and blame around it. And the elements of fire scenario. In this one, risky conditions exist, but not a lot of people realize it. In this scenario is common where there's a person with specialized knowledge. So maybe they can see a problem brewing, but other people don't have the information to know that it's going to happen. How do you recognize these scenarios? Well, the first one is the pain principle scenario. You'll see that the problem is acknowledged and accepted. It's the kind of situation where people say, oh, this is the way we've always done it, maybe next year, I know it doesn't make sense, I just work here. You'll hear things like that in a pain principle scenario. You'll also observe widespread workarounds, so people find different ways of getting around the problem, or people just refuse to talk about it. So in the pain principle scenario, there's a lack of engagement with the problem and no support for the solution. In the barn door scenario, there's something bad has happened and there's concern or panic around the problem. Everybody thinks it's a disaster. They throw up their hands. They decide to reverse course or maybe even assign blame. There's also evidence of rumors going around, perhaps, and people talking about things behind closed doors. In the barn door scenario, there's a lot of negative expectations and the inability to focus on a solution. In the elements of fire scenario, there's a lack of understanding of the problem. So people just don't see that the elements of a forest fire are right there in the among the peaceful trees. There's widespread disbelief, and people aren't interested in talking about it. So in the elements of fire scenario, the knowledge of the problem that makes you enthusiastic to solve it isn't shared or understood by others. So given that these scenarios exist, it's the next thing that needs to be done is to choose the strategy that will best fit with the scenario to get your idea executed. So we'll talk about making a plan using the 3 E's. This shows you a summary of what we're talking about. So as you can see on the left, there's the 3 different scenarios, and then the situation that we described, and then what strategy you would apply to address that scenario. So for example, the pain principle scenario, where there's really no engagement with the problem because everyone has their head in the sand, you would try to engage people. With the barn door scenario, there's negative expectations, so you want to work on those expectations using metrics. And in the elements of fire scenario, there's not a lot of knowledge about the problem, so you want to attack it with enthusiasm and messaging. So you might find also that the situation, the scenarios and the situations may present themselves in combination. So you can also use the E3 methods in combination as well. So let's talk about engagement. Engagement is very good when there's a pain principle, when you see a pain principle scenario, because people are just not very interested in supporting your project or your idea for fixing the problem. So engagement really means bringing people together to build a network that will increase the likelihood of sponsorship and also help you succeed in your project. With expectations, the second E, expectations means that you use metrics to support your idea or initiative. So remember, in the barn door scenario, everybody is afraid, nobody knows where to go, there's a lot of finger pointing and blame, and the way to refocus people is to identify the metrics to show people, okay, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and here's how we can improve. And using metrics will focus people on the real issues and help you to achieve your project. And finally, enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is always important, whatever scenario you're in, but particularly in an elemental fire scenario, people need to be educated and communicated with so they understand where you're coming from. And if you see a problem, you want to create a message and continue to repeat it over and over so that people understand and maintain focus. So these are the 3 E's that are strategies that you can deploy when you want to start your project. And they can be deployed in very real ways. And that's going to talk a little bit about how he's used E3 to achieve 3 of his projects. Matt?
Thanks, Gretchen. So I'm going to talk to you about some real-world experiences we've had here at Blue Cross and how we've been able to utilize the E3 method and the IDEA tactics to achieve some goals. So you'll probably notice lots of overlap across the principles and strategies, but I found that there's usually one that is dominant in any given situation. So my first example here is going to be around the pain principle scenario. In this instance, it was some customer service issues that we were experiencing around the inability for us to give consistent, relevant information to our members or providers, and it was causing us some issues around first call resolution, long wait times, lots of kind of hidden costs for our customer service end. It was a known issue, but it was one of those traditional, I can't do it right now, it's too expensive, or my own personal favorite, that's just the way we do things around here. So what we decided to do as a group was to take the identified problem and go to the stakeholders or the business owners within customer service and work directly with them to develop a plan that would impact the day-to-day lives of our CSPs, make the end user's life easier by understanding their pain points in the current state, and then driving toward their desired outcomes that would help us drive adoption and also have a positive impact for our customers. We did this and then were able to go and elicit responses from the management to support this initiative through the available metrics that we had of the current state versus the future state. And we ran through the scenarios of how we would be able to provide new and easier ways to address the concerns of our CSPs through better search, better taxonomy, better information sharing within the organization. By getting management support through showing the metrics, we were able to also align to the needs of the customer service area. In our business, there are ebbs and flows to the call volumes. We know there are certain times when there's going to be a heavier call volume than at other times. And so by working with that internal network, we were able to provide the new processes and new tools to our customer service representatives in a timely manner that was at a low time for our call volume, and align that with training, messaging, change management support in order to drive that adoption and to give both Blue Cross as a whole a win, but also our customer service reps, and help us keep our retention of those reps higher and reduce our call volume, reduce our first call resolution and our call times, which drives savings for us as a company. So by utilizing the IDEA tactics, we identified, developed, elicited, and aligned our plan to provide success for the customer service area. Our next example is around the barn door scenario. And in this case, what we had recognized both through our own experience but also through anecdotal evidence across the organization is that at the time, our project management office did not have a standardized method of developing artifacts or tracking artifacts or budgets or any of those sorts of things outside of the corporate level in terms of the approval of the projects. So one project manager may run something different than the next project manager across the hall. So this is one of those things where it was such a massive problem. You got a lot of pushback in terms of it's too hard, or we've got too many projects in line, we can't fix it right now, we'll fix it later, or it's the PMO's problem. And so again, we identified the problem was that there was no standardization. So we went directly to the project management office and grabbed 3 or 4 of their best, considered best PMs, and worked with them to develop templates that the entire PMO would use for our SharePoint sites, communications, the cadence of those communications, the structure of those communications, taxonomies to track the project artifacts, the notifications about which projects had regulatory impact versus financial impact. And so we were able to, through developing that plan, we were able to begin running a pilot across 8 projects. Some were in flight, some were new projects. And we wanted to run a pilot so that we could actually grab some metrics to compare our future state versus our current state and prove that we would demonstrate the efficiency gains that we were expecting and savings around missed deadlines, missed budgets, missed ROIs, whatever the case may be. And so once we ran our pilot over the course of about 6 months, excuse me, we were able to recognize that out of the 8 projects, 6 of those, so 75%, came in on budget versus 50% or less than 50% on the current state. We also recognized a 62.5% of the projects, or 5 out of 8, came in on time versus 33% on the current state. So that in of itself were powerful metrics, but we were also able to show some additional wins through the onboarding of new resources. As a resource would come or go for a particular part of the project, typically you would have anywhere from 5 to 10 days of ramp-up time for these individuals. In the standardized method, we were able to show a 2-day ramp-up. So you're having anywhere from a 60 to 80% decrease in your ramp-up time. Once we had these metrics, we were able to go to the executives across the PMO, as well as in some of the other approval organizations within Blue Cross, and show that with this standardized methodology, we would be able to reduce our rework, reduce our cost, reduce our overspend, and track directly to what we expected in our project management initial offerings, as well as track our resource hours much more clearly, which align directly with our corporate strategy to simplify our work and manage our administrative spend and reduce that over time. So it was a little bit longer in terms of our start to finish, but again, we utilized the IDEA tactics to identify the problem, develop templates and strategies, elicit approval through metrics, and then align to a top-level corporate strategy. My last example is around the elements of fire scenario, and this is actually a current issue that we are dealing with. Blue Cross has made a decision to migrate to Office 365 across the entire suite, so email, SharePoint, OneDrive, the whole shooting match. So what we're doing was considered an IS project, and as we initially brought up the issues that we saw from an information governance office as regulatory and e-discovery and privacy impacts were considered to be not as big an issue, because their point of view was, don't worry about it, we'll deal with it later. It's a technology project, not a governance project, not recognizing the potential negative impact to us as a company if we're unable to comply with our regulatory or litigation obligations. So we had identified this issue, and as the enthusiasm and elements of Fire Scenario will show you, this is pretty classic, and that no one that was owning the project recognized this as a problem. So we went to develop a governance strategy in collaboration with some other interested parties in our organization. So our audit and risk management group, our compliance group, legal, got together, and we developed a cohesive strategy and messaging for this Office 365 transition. So when we went to elicit support, what we did was by developing internally our consistent messaging, we were able to come as a unified group with our issues and express the problem and make IS understand what the problem was, but also offer them a carrot, if you will. What we were able to offer is that we would own the configuration of each of the components, thus taking some of the burden off of IS and recognizing that that was outside of their core understanding of how to configure something for compliance, regulatory compliance, litigation, and offer them that one less thing to do. So once we had gotten that buy-in, we were able to align our requirements with the in-flight project schedules, the business needs, and of course our governance needs. And we haven't finished implementation yet on our email exchange, but we have already noticed a 6-week improvement in our turnaround or expected turnaround for implementation, which obviously is hidden cost savings, cost avoidance, and speed to migration. So it's been very well received in that respect, but it did take a great deal of work to recognize the issue and a willingness to step up and say, this is a problem, we've got to fix it, you can't just ignore it. So through lots of different scenarios and lots of different stakeholder groups within the organization, we've been able to, and just in these 3 examples, attack quite a bit of cost savings and negative impacts to the company, and turn those around to actually be benefits and drive change.
Great, thank you so much, Matt. Those examples of your customer service issue, of your Office 365 issue, and of the PMO. Keep forgetting that one. The PMO office really illustrate how you can take understanding the scenario, applying a strategy, and then bringing in some tactics to get a project from the idea stage to the support stage to the execution stage. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We've put together a summary of the E3 methodology. As you can see here, each scenario is listed, and the approach, the overall tactic, and then the idea execution. And we're happy to share this with you. We also provide at Optimity workshops where we can come into your office and help you or a group identify the scenario, identify what approach to use, identify and build the network, or find the metrics, or develop a message, and then help you execute your idea. So if you're interested in that, just let us know. But now we thought we would open it up to questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Gretchen. This is Chad again. We've got some questions in, some really good ones. So I'll just jump right in. Can you give us an example of how you've engaged stakeholders to get involved in a project?
Sure. We had a very interesting situation when we did that records management program, because at first because we didn't have executive mandate, there was really no communication that would essentially give us permission to talk to people. So we were a little bit stuck, because on one hand we needed information about what kind of records each department had, but on the other hand we didn't have kind of an introduction to the department heads. And what we ended up doing is asking for introductions from the executives that we did know. So we would talk to the head of, say, the account, and we did have a steering committee. So we'd say to the representative on the steering committee from finance, who else do you know that you can introduce us to? And we can go meet that person, explain why records management is important and how it can be beneficial to your department. And once we did that, then it kind of went viral, because then that person introduced us to another department head and then another department head, and we were able to speak with all 20 departments based on those introductions. And then once we had the introduction to the head of the department, again, we asked the head of the department for representatives in their group that would be appropriate people to talk about records and what they knew, and who, to whom it was important to find access records, to store records, who's struggling with managing records. So the way we engaged people was building this network through recommendations and introductions. And that was very helpful, because we never went into a meeting where people weren't friendly to us because we had come through someone else. So that was very, very helpful for us. And we ended up doing, and in an organization of about 1,500 people, we ended up with a group of 300 people who were helping us, who are continuing to execute the program today. So it does take time, but asking is very helpful.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the things that I've done is rarely eat lunch alone. Set up meetings with the people you know are stakeholders, or the ones that you know are getting things done and that you can help them. And essentially you need to, what I've done is kind of date my executives. I go and listen to their problem and what is driving them crazy, and then try and figure out a way to fix it.
That sounds great, guys. It sounds like that kind of interpersonal networking that's so up close really plants the seeds for the cultural change necessary to really get buy-in to not only identify the problems and get support, but drive the changes forward that are going to need to happen as a result.
That's a great point, Chad, actually. And, corporate executives and C-suite executives love it when you say, there's a problem, but we already have the seeds in place to solve the problem. And so it's very helpful, yes, to have to work with people at the very beginning, a lot of people at the very beginning, because then the program is already, before it's even established, it's almost already going.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great.
And so it's not a big, you don't have to do that heavy lift at the end. The change management is kind of walks hand in hand with the project itself.
That makes sense. We've got, let's see, another question. Some companies are structured in a very siloed way. How do you build an enterprise network when you really only work with a small group? You kind of addressed this in your prior question a little bit. Is there more you'd like to say about breaking down silos?
I would say that it's difficult, obviously, because depends on the size of your organization, how far spread out it is. national, global. I'm a little bit spoiled by just being in a state, but we go, and as I said earlier, I kind of date my executives. I make sure that I always set up at least 3 or 4 lunches or meetings a week, kind of one-on-one with people that are at a minimum a director level, if not a VP, to find out what's going on and what what issues they're having. Not to have them help me, but to find out what they have problems with. And that is a good way to get an understanding of your business, but also get your name recognized when you go into a location to try and get something done. You're not coming in cold. They already kind of know what you are about and what you bring to the table.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Matt. And the other thing that I would say is fear of silos comes from politics. And just like in global politics, you have countries who have their own self-interest, but then you have ambassadors and you have diplomacy. And so I would think about it as working across those silos using diplomacy, and you can become the ambassador for the area that you're in or the project that you want to do. So you're not joining the other organization, you're just being the conduit between 2 areas.
I would imagine that in acting as that conduit, that the various parties or business units that you're interfacing between really appreciate that bridge once it's there.
It's a really fun thing to do because people say, oh, wow, I never knew what you guys in marketing did. That's really cool. And hey, we have these archival pictures in PR. Maybe you guys can use them as a thing. And so you kind of, it happens because we're human beings. It does happen once people are introduced to each other that they tend to, can think of ways to collaborate. And then that helps break down the silos too.
Cool. Let's see, another question. Some projects are not quantitative. How do you use expectations strategy in that case?
It's very interesting. You can make anything quantitative that you want. So if how many people like red jelly beans, that's it's not red jelly beans in themselves are qualitative, and if people like them or not, it is qualitative, but you can kind of turn anything into a quantitative result. You can also do surveys to find projects, and you can also make concepts that aren't necessarily mathematical, but they can be conceptually measuring something, like a map. A map is a concept of a distance. So you can use pictures and things like that to make the point. But the idea is to make your, using metrics is to show people how something is moving along and show progress.
Yeah, and I would push back on either the business owner or the project manager or whomever is approving these projects. What is their success criteria? How are they going to measure success? How did they even get it approved if there's not some metric that they're measuring for success? If there's not a measurement that they're using to even get approval for the funding, then I would have bigger questions as to why it's even happening. So from my point of view, if they can't offer you something to measure, then they're going to have a hard time showing success.
Do you find, either of you, do you find that it is a common ask from clients to help them quantify what they have previously thought of as qualitative data?
Yes. And one of the things that we also do is this concept of expanding ROI into IROI. So maybe the head of finance, to him, ROI is increases in cash flow, but ROI to somebody else could be increases in efficiency. And so understanding what individuals' own values are and their personal ROI is very helpful to getting support from people. So you relate the benefits back to their particular needs.
And I would imagine that goes a long way towards securing the sponsorship and the buy-in that all of this is aiming for.
Yes, you have to make it part of messaging, and that enthusiasm piece as well is getting people excited about the project. And the way to get people excited about it is to make it important to them. How is it going to make their life better? How are they going to look good? And sometimes in meetings we even say, how are you compensated? How are you compensated at the end of the year? And how can we kind of tie this project into making sure that your year-end performance evaluation looks even better?
Mm-hmm. And that's a fantastic reward to tie it to.
Yes, we all, and that's why that's why all of this, people are doing this to enhance their own performance, and using this methodology in itself can be very meaningful in that.
Well, cool. Thanks to you both. We're a little bit early, but we've gone through our questions. Any closing thoughts from you, Gretchen, or you, Matt?
I think, with any methodology, it's good to try it on and personalize it, but also it takes some confidence and courage to go out and do it. And we would encourage everyone to try it. You can try it at home on a really small family project, or you can try it at work in your department, or you can try it in a big enterprise project. But it's really getting people to support you, and measuring results and communicating are the three most important things to getting anything that you want to get done.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and just add that you do have to be courageous, and you do have to be willing to take some heat for trying to fix things that are not necessarily things that are apparent to other people, or that they're willing to, or they just accept it as the status quo. Changing that mindset, changing that culture, turning the battleship, if you will, takes some time and some effort, and you really need to have some backbone to do it.
It really works, and we would love to hear from anyone who has other questions or would like to follow up. So thank you so much for your time, and Chad, thank you for being the moderator and Matt for presenting.
Yeah, you're welcome, Gretchen. Thanks to you. And I just wanted to say that we are out of time this afternoon. If there are additional questions, we will follow up with the questioners directly following the webinar. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we'll hope you'll be back soon for another Optimity Advisors webinar.